Hey everyone, welcome back to Volume Up Real Reviews. I am so glad the writers and actors finally got paid because I am excited to talk about my movie review of The Marvels. So, before I begin, I want to remind the audience once again that this is a spoiler review of the movie. If you would like to see my shorter spoiler free review of the Marvels, please check out my TikTok. I will post the link down below. With that, you've been warned, and the review with spoilers starts now. One team I want to give credit for to this movie are the writers themselves. This movie could have easily been a confusing mess, but instead, they took something as difficult as quantum entanglement and turned it into a fun adventure and a very interesting plot point. And I can say that I honestly enjoyed this movie even more because of how they were able to take that concept and make it digestible to the audience. The Marvels takes place 30 years after the events of the first Captain Marvel movie. Carol Danvers had come back to Hala, like she said, and destroyed the Supreme Intelligence. And after she does that, the planet starts to die. The atmosphere starts to turn toxic, the oceans are drying up, and even the sun is starting to burn out. There was also a civil war on the planet, but they really didn't go into that too much, and we didn't see it. But we do meet the new Kree leader, Dar-Ben. The movie begins with her and her soldiers digging up an ancient quantum band. Now, Dar-Ben is only surprised to find that there is one of them at the site that they dug it up. The other band is on the arm of Kamala Khan, aka Miss Marvel on Earth. Dar-Ben, when she gets this bangle, she puts it on her and she's able to use her hammer that the Krees have, and she forces open a jump point. And this is where the power entanglement happens. Because you see, Monica Rambeau, she's working up in space on the Saber space station, and she notices something wrong with the jump point, so she goes to investigate. Carol is on the planet that Dar-Ben opened up the joint point at, and Kamala's quantum band is glowing. So when Monica Rambeau, Captain Marvel touch the point at the same time while Kamala's bracelet is glowing, it switches all three characters' places. And a really fun fight scene happens, and anytime they use their light-based powers, they switch places. Once all three women are able to be in the same place, they have to team up to try to and stop Dar-Ben. The first place they go to is Tarnax, where the Skrull refugee colony is. Dar-Ben and the Skrull leader Droge had originally made a temporary truce and agreement to bring the Skrulls back into the Kree Empire. But when the Marvels arrive, Dar-Ben uses this as an opportunity to say that the Skrulls are going back on their treaty, and then she forces open a jump point and sucks the air out of Tarnax and into Hala. The Marvels save as many Skrulls as they can, but Captain Marvel calls on Valkyrie to come get the rest of the Skrull refugees that are on the ships and take them to a new planet so they can settle there. The team then goes to Aladna, which is a planet that is 99.6% water and where the entire culture speaks through singing. And just as an aside, as a music teacher, this was arguably one of my favorite Marvel scenes, easily top 20 just for the creativity of this planet. Now, before the team gets to the planet, they start training to try to control their switching. And it's a really fun and unique training sequence, something that we really haven't seen in a Marvel movie to this magnitude. And when the team arrives on Aladna, it turns out that Carol Danvers is actually married to the prince of the planet. Now, watching the entire planet singing and eventually Brie Larson singing as well, it was such a treat. And I really enjoyed this section of the movie. Now, when the Marvels fight Dar-Ben on Aladna, even though they have much more control over when their power switches, they lose the fight. And Dar-Ben then once again rips open a jump point, which starts sucking water out of Aladna and onto Hala. The trio makes their way back to Earth, and when they do, Dar-Ben has moved her ship into position to take Earth's sun, siphon that into Hala's sun. So the trio has to go fight her one last time. That is also when Darben finds out that Kamala has the matching bangle and fights really hard to get it. Now, the trio puts up a really good fight against Darben, even temporarily beating her. But Darben tricks the team and she's able to steal Kamala's bangle. And when she goes to use both open at the same time, she tears open a hole in space. Unfortunately, the power is too much for her, and she winds up destroying her body. And the tear that she leaves actually opens up to another universe. So, what the team has to do to try to close this is Kamala and Carol channel their energy into Monica because remember, Monica can absorb energy, and she uses her power to close the tear, but she's also stuck on the other side in this alternate universe. Afterwards, Kamala, she decides that she wants to put together a new team. Her first recruit is Kate Bishop, and in their conversation, she also brings up Cassie Lang, so this is clearly foreshadowing the creation of the Young Avengers. Then, in the post-credit scene, it turns out that Monica is still alive and she was saved by the X-Men. In particular, when Monica wakes up, she sees her mother, but it's an alternative version of her called Binary. And she also meets Beast. And Binary never had a daughter, so while Monica is saying, "Oh, mom, this, oh, mom, that," Binary, she's like, I don't know you. So yeah, it was a very neat scene because it sets up the X-Men eventually coming to the MCU. Now, I skipped a lot of plot details, but I don't want to spoil too much for those who were watching this and haven't seen the movie, because there were plot points about the Saber space station, Goose, and Kamala's family that were a part of this movie as well, but I don't want to give a bullet point review. I just wanted to touch on the parts that really stood out to me and that I really liked. Now I want to talk about the characters in this movie. Brie Larson, Tiona Paris, and Iman Vellani were the core of this movie, and their on-screen chemistry was just on point. I really enjoyed it. Also really enjoyed how Vellani as Kamala Khan just stole the show in this movie. I hope everyone who watched this realized that her comic book sketches at the beginning reminded me so much of Spider-Man Spider-Verse drawings, and those movies. And I really hope that you got the same sense that I did. And she was just really fun in this movie. I really liked how she was the quirky teen in this movie, and they just let her be that quirky, awkward teenager. Then Tiona Paris as Monica Rambeau. She was the emotional core of this movie. She obviously had a lot of sadness and resentment built up towards Captain Marvel, and she was able to channel her emotions into a heartfelt performance, especially when they did eventually have to have that heart to heart discussion. But I gotta say, two scenes that Paris was in, two of her scenes in particular with the team did make me tear up. And in a movie like this, I really appreciated her character moments in those parts a lot. But let's talk about Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. You could tell she was enjoying herself in this movie because she was definitely more expressive and more animated than her first outing. Now, talking about the first Captain Marvel movie, one of the main criticisms was how stiff Brie Larson was. And looking back at it now and rewatching the movie before I saw this, I realize now just how weak of an argument that was. Because when Danvers was taken by the Kree in the first movie, one of the things that they were trying to get through was about how, through to her in particular, was how she needed to stifle her emotions. And through the first movie, she was doing that a lot. So, yeah, she was giving a stiffer performance. But in this movie, she was using a device that for the last 30 years was trying to help her unlock more of her memories and be herself once again. And so now we see in this movie how Carol Danvers is when she is allowed to be herself and be more expressive. And it was a character that I really enjoyed even more. And this is someone who actually really enjoyed the first Captain Marvel movie. I also really like Zoe Ashton as Dar-Ben in this movie. A lot of criticism that I saw was that she was just a cookie cutter villain that was no true threat to the team. And I disagree with that take. I think Dar-Ben was a villain that was needed for this film. Not every Marvel villain could be a Killmonger, Thanos, Loki, or other iconic Marvel villain. Sometimes you just need a villain that can advance the plot. But I think that Dar-Ben was a little bit more than that. First off, she had motive: save her planet. She witnessed Danvers destroying the Supreme Intelligence, so her motivation in her mind was justified. Danvers nearly destroyed Hala, so Dar-Ben was targeting all the planets and cultures that Danvers cared about most to get revenge and try and restore her planet. Danvers was really close with the Skrull. Obviously, the Prince of Aladna was someone that she was close with since she married him, and Earth was her home. So Dar-Ben was using these planets' resources to replenish Hala. So I am not in the consensus that Dar-Ben was a bad villain. Now, I'm not going to say that she's a top 10 Marvel villain, but I'm also going to say that she doesn't deserve the criticism that she is getting. While I truly enjoyed this movie, it did have its flaws. In particular, the end of Act 1 and two-thirds of Act 2 were a little bit slower, and that drug the pacing down for me a little bit, but not too much where it negatively affected my enjoyment of this movie. Plus, if I was to point out my biggest criticism of this movie, it would be Nick Fury and the Saber plot points. I think that it was added tension. And instead of using the Saber space station to assist the Marvels, I think that they just used it as a point of tension to give Nick Fury something to do. And I think that they could have given Nick Fury something to do in a more positive aspect instead of creating unnecessary tension. Because this was definitely not my favorite Samuel L. Jackson performance as Nick Fury. I would have also appreciated if we learned more about the Kree Civil War. It was mentioned in passing. It's a couple of times, but we never saw the actual consequences of the Kree Civil War. We just saw the consequences of Carol Danvers destroying the Supreme Intelligence. We don't know how Dar-Ben came to rise to power, and I think that would have given Dar-Ben more depth as a villain in this movie, and I don't think people would have seen her as just a two-dimensional villain. Other than those small critiques, I really enjoyed this movie and appreciated it for what it was. I truly don't understand where the hate for this movie is coming from. I am glad the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes at this time is at 84% because on social media, there were a lot of people who were blasting this movie as a bad movie before even watching it. Now, I will eventually be doing a video in the future on why we should all just stay away from Rotten Tomatoes. But for now, I hope those that are watching this review can appreciate the Marvels for what it is. It's a fun space adventure with a trio of female superheroes who are trying to make the best of a bad situation. There was a lot of laughs, a lot of great action set pieces, and even some tears. This is what makes a movie great, and I hope that everyone will just stop listening to what they hear on social media and go see a movie for themselves. If you like the trailer in some way, go see it and then decide for yourself whether you like it or not. Because to me, this movie was great, borderline excellent. I won't be releasing a Marvel movie ranking video yet for a while, but I can say that this movie was a solid 8 out of 10. And I hope that you get the same appreciation from this movie like I did. Thank you for tuning in. And this has been Volume Up Real Reviews. Stay tuned for my next movie review.